I attend a college that is located in one of the poorest cities in Northern Carolina. The campus is relatively safe, since the school employs its own Department of Public Safety. But after the sun sets, it's usually a good call to remain indoors because that's when the townies come out, and they tend to wander into the campus. About 2 years ago, I was living in an apartment complex on the main part of campus, and I still didn't have a car yet. It was the end of the fall semester, and I was the last person in my apartment of 3 girls to finish taking finals, so I was home alone since my roommates had already gone home for winter break. I got back from taking my last exam and followed my usual routine of dejectedly collapsing into bed to cry/sleep off the effects of pulling an all-nighter. When I finally woke up, it was already past 10 p.m., and I was starving. Unfortunately, the student grocery store and cafeteria were closed for the day, and I had nothing in my apartment to eat and no car to get food elsewhere. I was woefully poking around the fridge in hopes that I could find something substantial to tide me over until morning. When I noticed a Domino's coupon that someone had stuck to the freezer, my stomach's pathetic cries for sustenance had been answered. I quickly decided that there was no shame in ordering a whole pizza plus cinnamon sticks for myself because 1. I was ravenous, 2. The completion of finals demanded some sort of celebration, and 3. If anyone asked, I was just gonna lie and say I was sharing with a friend, or something along those lines. Anyway, I eagerly ordered up my feast for 1 and provide the cashier with my address, apartment, and cell number. I typically never give out my number to anyone, but I had ordered delivery from Domino's in the past, and I knew that they needed my number to call me once they were outside because the drivers always got lost navigating through campus. About 20 minutes later, I got the call. My food was here. For reference, it was now close to midnight, and the campus was pretty much dead since most of the students had gone home. The driver told me he was parked in front of a dorm building that was right across the street from my apartment. I hustled out of my apartment and was going down the stairs when I spotted the delivery guy waiting outside of his car with my pizza. At this point, my sense of caution kicked in, and I slowed my pace as my brain took in the fact that there were no other students out. The lighting was very bad, and I was essentially walking up to a stranger in his car that still had its engine running. As I neared the bottom of my steps, I silently hoped that he would cross the street and approach me so that I wouldn't have to get near the car. Of course, that didn't happen. I made my way across the street and was finally able to get a good look at him. He was relatively short and a Hispanic guy, maybe around 5'7" or 9, in his early 20s, and my nerves were getting bombarded by the creeper vibes he was giving off. I did my best to appear calm and keep the mood light and friendly. He made some comments about how late it was and how no one was around, but I just signed the receipt as quickly as possible, gave him my thanks and an awkward smile, and hightailed it out of there as soon as he handed me my food. I could feel him watching me as I climbed the stairs back to my place. Once I got back into my apartment, I locked and chained up the door and sat down on the living room couch to calm myself. After a few moments, I shrugged off the situation and reasoned that it was just my paranoia and overactive imagination acting up again. I just turned on the TV and was about to take my first bite of pizza when I got a text from an unknown number. It read, "You're hella sexy," from Phil though. I connected the dots and matched the text number to the call that I received earlier from the pizza delivery guy. My initial reaction, of course, was shock, since nothing like this had ever happened to me before, but that eventually melted away into laughter and disbelief when I considered my appearance at the time. Like I had mentioned earlier, I had just woken up from my nap after taking the last of my finals. I was wearing a pair of raggedy sweatpants and a loose sweatshirt. My hair was nappy and tied up in a messy ponytail. My face was probably greasier than the pizza I was eating. And to top it all off, I had my glasses on. Definitely not a pretty picture, much less anything that could even come close to resembling hella sexy. The next morning I got a call from my boyfriend John, and I casually told him about Phildo and the events that had transpired the previous meeting. After sheepishly trying to defend my actions on the basis of poor judgment caused by extreme hunger, and promising never to do that type of thing again, John convinced me that I should report it to the campus police as a precautionary measure. I gave them a call, and an officer stopped by my apartment a few hours later. I relayed my story. He took some pictures of the text message, and he wrote down Phildo's phone number. The officer then told me that he would contact the Dominoes if I wanted him to, but that it would most likely result in Phildo's termination. I was relatively unfazed by the whole situation, and I told the officer that I just wanted to make sure that this creep never did anything like this to any other girls on campus, but at the same time, I didn't want him to lose his job. The officer then started asking me questions about how I felt after my encounter. Questions along the lines of, did you feel threatened by Phildo? Do you feel safe in your apartment with the knowledge that Phildo has both your phone number and your exact address? If I wasn't scared before, I definitely was now, and during the course of my questioning, I had broken out in a cold sweat, and my traitorous imagination began conjuring up all sorts of dastardly situations that ended up in my untimely demise. Obviously, I ended up giving the officer the go-ahead to pursue my case and contact the Dominoes. About a month later, while I was at home celebrating the holidays, I got a call from my boyfriend. I had left him the keys to my apartment so that he could store his bike there and crash in my room while I was away. He told me that he had stopped by my place, but that he couldn't get in because the keys weren't working. He also said that it looked like someone had broken in because there was some glass on the floor and a wooden board across my living room window. I was pretty upset because this was my first time hearing about it, so I called the school the next day to figure out what the hell had happened. Housing transferred my call to the public safety department, and the officer I spoke with was only able to tell me that, according to their records, a maintenance worker had called them 2 days after I had headed to report my broken window. Public safety had responded by boarding up the window and changing the lock. That's when they noticed it had been tampered with. I convinced the officer to let my boyfriend into the apartment so he could check if anything was stolen, and thankfully, nothing was. My gut tells me that it was Phildo who did it. It was Phildo who tried to pick my lock and then broke my window. It scares me even more now when I consider the fact that nothing had been stolen. My flat-screen TV was right beside the window that had been broken, and my boyfriend's fancy road bike was sitting right there in the living room. Why didn't he steal anything? Does that mean his intentions were to break in and get his revenge on me? The girl that had cost him his job? Would this have still happened if I hadn't given the officer permission to pursue the case? I try not to spend too much time speculating about what Phildo's true intentions were, but when I do, it still makes my heart race when I think about what could have happened if I'd still been in the apartment at the time. I used to work at Pizza Hut when I was in high school. I have a lot of bizarre stories from working there, but this is the one that scared me the most. My Pizza Hut was the kind where you could only pick up the food, and there was also a wall between the store front and the kitchen, so if you were in the front of the store, you were pretty much on your own. The store itself was located in a kind of out-of-the-way, dead shopping center. Oh, and it was in Las Vegas. That should tell you a lot about the level of our clientele. For some reason, I always got stuck on the late night shift despite being in high school. So, on most weekends by 10 at night, it would just be me and one other cook in the store twiddling our thumbs. I would hang out at the front, and the cook usually was way at the back of the store, out of earshot. One night, I was hanging out behind the counter, and I saw this guy walk past. I didn't think much of it and went back to doing nothing while waiting for my shift to end. Then the door to the store opened. I looked up and realized that it was the same guy who just went by. He was tall but also skeletally thin, and there was also something not right about his eyes. But despite him putting me on edge, I got up, greeted him, and asked him what he'd like to order. Nothing. He just stands there in the front, staring up at the ceiling, muttering to himself. I was only 17, and for the most part, a good kid despite living in Sin City, so I didn't really know what to make of it. Now, I would probably just chalk it up to drugs. Anyway, he was still standing there, vacant expression and muttering in what sounded like tongues. Then he abruptly spinned around and just walked back out of the store without even acknowledging that I existed. I was unnerved, but shook it off and sat back down. It's getting towards the end of my shift, and I'm counting down the minutes when I realized somebody had walked back into the store. I looked up, and it was the same guy, same creepy eyes, only this time he was holding a phone up to his ear, muttering unintelligibly. So I realized he wasn't talking to anyone, and worse, staring right at me super intense and unblinking. At this point, I was starting to get frightened. He keeps looking right at me, and so I try to be polite and ask if I can help him. He starts walking towards the counter, still staring at me. Then suddenly he asked in a perfectly normal voice if his order was ready. I'm mentally going, what the fuck at this point, and not sure how to answer. So I just went with the truth and tentatively pointed out to him that he didn't order anything when he was first in the store. He gets this bug-eyed look on his face and lunges towards the counter. I jump back at this point, and my heart is pounding because this guy is obviously not sane. I was also afraid that he was going to pull out a knife or something and stab me. Then, just as abruptly as he lunged, he yells, "God damn it!" Looks super confused, upset, like he was about to cry, and puts his head in his hand and starts pulling at his hair. I start to feel slightly bad at this point, and I ask as nicely and calmly as I can if he maybe wants to order something now. His head snaps back up, his expression is now completely blank, and he looks totally deranged. I'm holding totally still because I'm afraid moving will set him off. Then thankfully the door to the store opens and a huge man walks in. He looks at this guy kinda confused, realizing that something's not right with him. The crazy guy then looks at him, and then at me, then started backing up until he was out of the door. He starts walking towards the edge of the store, never taking his eyes off me the whole time, and then goes past the edge of the store, and was gone. The guy who walked in looked at me and asked, "What the hell was that?" I look at him, and I go, "I have no idea. I think he was crazy." I try to shake it off, but I'm totally on edge for the rest of my shift. When I clocked out that night, I made one of the drivers walk out with me. Then, I jumped in my car and got out of there. I never saw that dude again, but it was a weird experience and was pretty unnerving. I also am not sure what he would have done if that guy hadn't walked in when he did. This happened a few years back when I was 12 or 13 years old. I'm from the Philippines, and it was a Sunday afternoon, probably 5 to 6 o'clock. I was at home with my dad, and my mom had just left to buy groceries about 30 minutes ago using one of our cars. As I was watching videos on YouTube, the doorbell suddenly rang. It rang quite a few times until I just had enough of it. That's when I went to open the door. Knowing that my dad was probably sleeping in the other room, I reluctantly went downstairs to open it. The thing is, I dreaded opening the front door for people ever since my grandpa scolded me for opening the door for a mailman in his house. He lectured me about how dangerous it could be, like I could be kidnapped or worse. With that thought, I climbed on the sofa, which was 3 feet away from the front door, and pulled the curtains to see who was ringing the doorbell. Note: the window I looked through was surrounded by a tall fence 4 to 5 feet away, so I felt perfectly safe, and I found it convenient later once I talked to him. He had a dark cap on and a blue jumper. He looked pretty normal to me, but we weren't expecting anyone on a quiet Sunday. I asked him what his business was, and he replied to me that he was supposed to deliver a pizza to my address. Excited and a bit confused, thinking that my dad secretly ordered a pizza for us, I told him to wait for me to get my dad. I climbed upstairs to my parents' room and saw that my dad was sleeping. I woke him up and told him if he had ordered a pizza, and he replied with a daze that he didn't. Disappointed, I went back downstairs to break the news to the delivery guy, who probably got the wrong address, but when I got to the window, he was gone. Since I was pretty young back then, I didn't think much of it until now. Today, I'm certain that I was going to be kidnapped. My reasons for believing this was, 1. It was quiet outside and my bedroom window was open, but I didn't hear a motorcycle revving near the house, nor did I hear it when he left. 2. He just left like that, even though I specifically told him to wait. I didn't say that we didn't order pizza. 3. I didn't see a logo of the pizza place he was working for. The strange thing was that we only have 2 pizza places that are near us, and they have a distinctive red color. 4. I didn't see a motorcycle near him, which was extremely odd. My mom's theory was that the guy probably thought that I was home alone because our single car was gone, and my dad rarely got out of the house since he was unemployed back then. What probably got him to leave was when I told him to wait for me to get my dad. If not for my grandpa scolding me, I would have answered the door and probably not be here writing this today.